Good evening, listeners. On these hot, hot summer nights, when you're lying in bed and can't sleep, what better way to while away the time than just to listen to some scary stories. I hope you enjoy these listeners as much as I did. And as ever, I'm Ramblingramm, presenting you with some new tales. Crow Man by Egg People 000. When I was a child, my grandparents lived in an old farmhouse in the countryside. Being a city kid, I'd always look forward to spending my summers out there. The possibilities for adventures were endless. My parents said it was good for me to get fresh air and spend time with my grandparents, but I think they mostly valued having time for themselves whilst I was away. The worst thing about being in the countryside was that there was no one to play with all summer. I had a big imagination as a kid, though, and always had a selection of made-up friends to spend time with. I even had a very special one for the summers spent at the farmhouse. The house was situated right next to a large strawberry field, and at the edge of that strawberry field stood my friend, the scarecrow I had named Crow Man. The name was inspired by my love for superheroes. I thought of Crow Man as a hero protecting the strawberries from nasty birds, as well as protecting me from all other kinds of dangers during our adventures together. Crow Man was a pretty normal scarecrow, head made out of straw-filled potato sack, with crudely sewn-on eyes and a mouth, and a hat balanced on top. He wore an old flannel shirt and jeans, and his hands were gardening gloves discarded by my grandmother. Every year my grandfather would replace the shirt with one of his old ones he no longer wore, and fix any parts of Crowman that had been broken by the weather. Crowman had been there as long as I could remember, and every year I looked forward to playing with him again. I would make up stories and games with him. I would imagine him standing or sitting next to me throughout the day as I went about my activities. I'd even write secret notes to Crowman and leave them in his pockets. When I slept, I would always have my curtains open. My window faced the strawberry field, and I could see Crowman's silhouette watching over me as I slept. I would talk to him inside my head until I fell asleep, chatting about what we could get up to the next day. He was truly my best friend during those childhood summers. Then, one year, right before I was set to go to the farmhouse, my grandmother got sick, and I ended up having to stay home. Over the summer, my grandmother sadly passed away. Crowman was the furthest thing from my mind during that time. Almost exactly a year later, my grandfather died too. My mother said he had died of a broken heart. My mother inherited the farmhouse, and that summer my parents took me there again, after nearly 2 years of not seeing the place. They thought it would offer me some sort of closure, I guess. When we arrived, the first thing I noticed was Crowman, standing in his usual spot. It was clear that my grandfather had not been taking care of it since my grandmother passed, though. His sack head was tattered and seemed to hang a bit loose. His hat was gone, and his flannel had rips and dirt all over it. Straw was hanging out from his neck and wrists. For the first time I didn't feel comforted looking at him. I felt strangely creeped out, almost afraid of him. It was hard to be at my grandparents' house after their passing, but I tried to get the most out of it. That's what they would have wanted after all. I went on adventures, this time without Crowman's imaginary version with me, and had a relatively good time. Every night, however, I closed my curtains to fall asleep, as Crowman's looming figure outside made me feel uneasy. One night, around a week after our arrival, I woke up from my slumber to a faint whisper. A voice called out my name quietly. The voice was strangely familiar, but I couldn't pinpoint it to any specific person I knew. I groggily opened my eyes and let them adjust to the pitch darkness of my room. Wake up! The voice continued. It sounded like it was coming from outside the window. I was half asleep and thought surely I was making this up, but got up anyway and went to open the curtains. Nothing outside was out of the ordinary. Despite the normalcy of everything, I suddenly felt thoroughly uncomfortable as I looked at Crowman. He stood in his normal spot, his arms up in a T-shape. He was facing away from me, his head slumped and hanging unnaturally off his shoulders. This wasn't his normal position, but it was windy outside that night, and his head was loose to begin with. I closed the curtains and got back into bed. The next morning I told my parents about the whisper, and we all agreed it was just a dream. The next night, however, weird things happened again. This time I woke up to an uncomfortable feeling of being watched, and as I rolled over in my bed, I realized my curtains were wide open. I tried to remember closing them before I went to bed. I was sure I had, but couldn't specifically remember doing it. It was such a mundane task, though, I probably wouldn't have remembered anyway. I saw the silhouette of Crowman through the window. This time he seemed to be looking directly at me. A chill ran down my spine. I stood up and went to close the curtains, and I saw a single crow sitting on Crowman's shoulder. I momentarily felt sad, almost guilty. My old friend couldn't even scare away crows anymore, I thought. I nodded at him as a symbolic gesture of some kind, before pulling the curtains closed in front of him. I went back to bed. I again told my parents about the night's events, and just to be sure I asked them if they had opened my curtains. They said no, and we decided it was another dream, or I had forgotten to close them myself. I went to bed without much worry that night. For the next few nights, nothing too out of the ordinary happened. I'd wake up a few times to a strange feeling, but I didn't hear any more whispers, and the curtains remained shut. Then, one night, things took a turn again. I woke up as usual to a weird, uncomfortable feeling of being watched. I didn't instantly roll over as I figured it was nothing, but then I heard a voice. It was so quiet I could barely hear it, but I could make out the words without problem. A low, calm male voice chanted. It sounded raspy and guttural, almost like the voice of an old man. It spoke very slowly, and the voice would have been relaxing if I had not been instantly terrified. I was paralyzed by fear, too afraid to move, so I just stayed very still, and hoped whatever was speaking to me would leave soon. I laid there for what felt like hours, until I finally dozed off. I woke up to the chirping of birds and bright morning light filling my room. As I sat up in bed, I realized that not only the curtains, but the window itself too, were wide open. I saw Crowman outside, minding his own business, and that's when I noticed something sitting on my windowsill, a neatly folded piece of notebook paper. I picked it up and unfolded it. The note was old and felt damp and brittle in my hands. The ink had spread, but the text was still readable. Plans for next summer, the note said, followed by a short list of everyday activities and games. I recognized my own messy handwriting and looked up at Crowman. I vaguely remembered writing the note 2 years prior, right before leaving the house at the end of the summer, and placing it in Crowman's flannel chest pocket. How had it ended up here? I felt uneasy as I placed the note down on my desk. I felt like an idiot marching out to the garden and up to Crowman. I straightened his head a bit before speaking to him quietly. "Hey, Crow," I said. I still felt uncomfortable even looking at him. Something about him made my skin crawl. But I was determined to make amends, as silly as it sounds. "My grandma and grandpa died. That's why I didn't come." I didn't know what else to say, so I just apologized and walked away. I wasn't about to let him be my imaginary friend again with how he made me feel, but at least I had made things right in my head now. The next night nothing happened, and I thought it had worked. I thought Crowman was done tormenting me. Turns out I got excited too early though, as the night after that things went from 0 to 100. My parents were aware of the nightmares I had been having, and offered to let me sleep in their room. I was a big boy though, and declined, despite being slightly nervous to sleep alone. That night I got ready for bed, made sure my window and curtains were shut tight, and fell asleep. I dreamed a lot that night, dreams I couldn't remember later, but apart from that I slept quite well. That was until I awoke in the early hours of the morning to a noise that sounded like dozens of crows all around me. It was dark, and I was thoroughly uncomfortable and disoriented. I quickly realized I wasn't in my bed. I felt the cool summer wind on my skin through my thin pajamas, and the floor under me wasn't a floor at all. I was lying on rough, cold dirt, with leaves scratching my face and arms. The noise of the crows filled my ears from every direction. I sat up as my eyes slowly adjusted to the darkness, and realized I was laying in the strawberry field, surrounded by blackbirds. I had no idea how I had ended up there, or why the birds were there in the middle of the night, but I felt more scared and confused than I ever had before. I stood up, my bare feet sinking into the dirt. In front of me I saw Crowman's silhouette. He just stood there watching me. "Stop!" I whimpered and started stumbling towards the house. The birds scattered around me as I walked through and shooed them the best I could. Just leave me alone," I continued without looking back. When I got back inside, I found a note on my bed. Once again it was neatly folded, but this time the words "Top Secret" were scribbled on the outside in my handwriting. I opened the note, my hands trembling. "Dear Crowman, I hate Grandma and Grandpa. They won't let me go down to the lake today. You're my only friend here and a superhero, so please help me so I can do whatever I want. Thanks, Crowley. With love, Michael Andrew Radley. I told my parents what had happened the next day, but didn't mention the note. They came to the conclusion that I was sleepwalking. I'd sleepwalked when I was younger, so it made sense to them. To me, it didn't. I was convinced Crowman was messing with me, and refused to sleep in my own room after that night. My parents soon realized I was terrified to go to sleep every night, so we left the house early. I never went back to the house. My parents sold it soon after that last time. They figured it was too much for me to be there after my grandparents' death. This was over a decade ago now, and I had forgotten all about it. But there's a reason I'm writing this now. I live in a relatively big town with my girlfriend these days, in an apartment building that sits on the edge of a small forest. Our bedroom window faces the forest, and I like to sleep with the curtains open to let the light in the morning. For the past few nights I've been waking up to a weird feeling of someone watching me through the window from amongst the tree line. I didn't think much of it. Figured I was just tired and stressed, but started closing the curtains for the night nonetheless. Then last night, something happened that brought back all these memories. My girlfriend was out of town visiting family, so I was alone in the apartment. I woke up in the middle of the night feeling uneasy again. But this time, the feeling was much more intense than usual. I thought maybe it was because I was all alone, but I'm not usually scared of a lot of things, so it didn't really make sense. I kept my eyes shut, hoping to fall back asleep straight away. Then I heard a quiet voice speak in the darkness. Hello. My eyes shot open in fear. Was there an intruder in my house? I stayed still, hoping whoever it was would think I was asleep. And when my eyes slowly got adjusted to the darkness, I could finally see it. The silhouette of a man standing bang in the middle of my bedroom. I was paralyzed with fear and tried to think of something I could use as a weapon, when I realized something. The person was stood perfectly still, with their arms up in a T shape, and their head hanging off their shoulders like the head of a ragdoll. Crowman. It was the only word I can think of as the memories flooded back to me. Being a grown man, I could only think of one thing to do in that situation. I covered my head with my blanket and didn't move for the rest of the night. I'm not sure if I fell asleep or not, but I only came out of my cocoon when I could see sunlight creep in through a crack in the curtains. There was no one in my room. I sat up in bed, wondering if it had all been a dream, when I saw something on the foot of my bed. It was a neatly folded note, with the word secret scribbled on top. I picked up the note and unfolded it. Dear Crowman, if you want, we can be best friends forever. Sincerely, Michael. Something is knocking on my mirror. Bye, but they were gone. 3:11 a.m. The bright blue numbers floated there in the darkness. They gave me a sense of location. They told me where I was in the world. Autopilot kicked in, navigating the mental map of my bedroom. Watch out for the end table. My half-asleep body brought me to the attached room as it had 1,000 unceremonious times before that. I closed my eyes as I relieved myself, desperate to climb back into the comfy darkness of my bed. As I finished up and began to leave, I heard it. I paused already halfway out the door. I glanced back into the bathroom, fully opening my eyes for the first time that night. The soft blue glow of a wall light illuminated the otherwise pitch-black room. It reflected off the glass of the shower door, the chrome of the faucet, and the mirror. I looked about briefly and saw nothing out of place, just the house settling. I began nestling back into the warm spot I'd left in the bed when it came again. I'm not sure how long I slept, but a sharp noise jolted me awake. As I began to sit up in bed, I heard it properly. The sound had an echoey, boxed quality to it. It was definitely coming from the bathroom. Pulling off the covers with purpose this time, I trudged over to investigate. The plumbing in the house had never been anything to write home about, but I'd get even less sleep than usual with a racket like this. My eyes exploded as I snapped the bathroom lights on and immediately turned them off again. I stood in the middle of the space, as if challenging the sound to happen again. From the sink I turned a handle, and the water came out fine enough. The drain gurgled as the brief stream was swept in. My brow furrowed as my mind combed its limited knowledge of piping. In that pause, from the wall, louder this time, the back of my neck felt hot. Why was that? It was a problem I'd need a real plumber for then. Of course, that was if there was a problem at all. Wasn't really all that loud of a sound anyway. I could still get back to sleep. I took a step back. The contents of the drawers rattled with the impact. My image trembled slightly with the vibrations of the mirror. I saw a confused expression in the glass, a look of worry etched on my face, but something else was wrong. With the reflection, the image wasn't right. I was pressed against the wall now, the knocking becoming a constant stream instead of brief bursts. What the hell was this? My hand fumbled for the light switch again, but I couldn't take my eyes off my reflection. A deep, uncomfortable prickle in the back of my mind told me what was wrong. I wasn't seeing everything in the reflection. Something was missing. As if just getting up to go to the bathroom in the dead of the night, my feet mindlessly took me forward. The knocking was evenly spaced and methodical now, but stronger than ever. My nose almost touched the glass. A trembling fist hovered before it, almost touching its reflective twin. In that deafening silence between the impacts, I inserted my own. Everything became still. Still inches from the mirror, fist raised, I scanned around the room. Nothing had changed. Blue light still struggled to fill all of the darkened bathroom's corners. The floor mat was soft beneath my feet. Behind me, the door to the towel closet remained closed. Still, the silence persisted. I breathed a sigh of relief and lowered my fist, chastising my silliness. The first thing I noticed was how my breath fogged up the mirror. It had become freezing in an instant. But I only tried to scream when I saw what was in the space where my fist had been. Behind me, in the darkest corner of the bathroom, were two wide, piercing eyes, and a brilliantly white row of human teeth. The darkness around them was deeper, completely unaffected by the nightlight. As the world fell away into unconsciousness, The shriek died in my throat. I suffered a nasty bump. The doctor said I'd been pretty lucky, all things considered. A tumble in the bathroom was a more common cause of death than you'd think, especially when alone. I nodded meekly as he said as much, wanting more than anything to say that I hadn't been alone. I was almost able to convince myself on the drive home that it had been a combination of a nightmare and the fall that created the incident last night in my mind. But as I gingerly stepped into the now well-lit bathroom later that day, I noticed something was wrong with the mirror. There were long scratches in it, thin but definite. I realized they were letters. Thank you for letting me in. Well, listeners, I sincerely hope you enjoyed the tales that I brought you this evening. It would be a great pleasure to me if you would like, comment, and subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. And please wait for me to bring you more tales to alter your perception of how the world may really be. This is Ramblingramm, signing off. Good night, listeners, and sweet dreams.